so pure. From ancient lore to future dreams, every question finds its gleam. Wherever she goes, answers will follow. Into the depths or up high in the hollow. Curiosity calls, she's ready to find solutions to everything on her mind.
Hello, hello, hello. It is you, it is me, and we are here again. Hello, Cynthia. How you doing? Good morning. I've got my first cup of coffee poured. Um, I'm ready. I was up super duper early this morning. I actually got to catch, um, I caught Legal Vices for the first time in ages, and I didn't even have a chance to say hi. Hello, AP. I didn't even have a chance to say hi in the chat, and he was gone. But he booted over to Meme Copium, whom I also haven't watched in forever. So I was having a lot of fun listening to that. And suddenly, out of nowhere, my internet decided to do something funny. And with 15 minutes to the show start, I had to restart my router, restart everything, set everything up again. And yeah, always fun. But that's okay. I'm here. Like I said, you're here. And it is time for chapter 6. Um, Now, it's been a little bit. So just a quick recap. Basically, we learned about Mount Weather last week. Well, last episode. I think that's a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, the balance of power and mostly about Mount Weather, which has always fascinated me. Um, so today, and this is very, very topical for the times we are in. So let's see how we do. Um, you know what? I didn't do this. I did have it set up, but I'm gonna do it again just in case. Because we love YouTube. We love YouTube. If it weren't for YouTube, none of us would have ever been here. Um, they are wonderful, wonderful. But sometimes, sometimes they have trouble with certain types of information being put out there. Oh, for Pete's sakes! And I don't have to sign in and everything. Oh, so what I'm going to do again is I'm opening the Rumble page, and just in case YouTube has any issues, uh, I'll be streaming there as well, and I'll have it open right now. There we go. And that way, if anyone has trouble over on the YouTube side, you guys, oop, trying to do it too quickly. I will pin the link to the Rumble just in case YouTube decides to have troubles, because, you know, they are wonderful and they are the first, the last, and the always streaming platform. But because it's an erection season, we really have to be careful. Um, Let me mute myself there. And here we go. See, now I'm in top chat, not the love chat. Um, in case, oops, trouble on the oops. See, you guys get to see this in action. YouTube's there, and I will pin it because I'm learning how to do these things. So if for whatever reason we disappear on YouTube, we are live on Rumble as well, and you can just switch straight over there and not miss a beat. So on that note, I will now say what the title is of Chapter 6. It is H.R. 4079 and FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. a tool that can be used to establish the police state. And patriots and tax protesters, you must never be found at home on any holiday. Your life depends on how well you can obey this rule. So take that, however you wish. I do know that they found Bill Cooper on his front doorstep on just a normal day, and killed him, shot him dead, the police. So, as well-meaning as his warnings are to militia members and patriots to not be at home on holidays, they got him on a normal day. So you got to keep your head on a swivel at all times, and do the best you can. So I don't know if that's visible, but we'll just get rid of that. I still say it's the best bookmark, but it doesn't have to be on screen. So let's get some coffee. Oh, let's do this with the right hand so I don't spill on the book. Yes, I am advertising louder with Crowder. I got myself a pair of their mugs, and they're great. I can't afford to keep up a membership with the mug club, but I did it for a few years when I felt it was most in need. So yeah, I really like what they're doing over there. Um, but yeah, so here we go. Let's learn about FEMA and why they are so wonderful and how they are the best option in any given disaster in your country. And excuse the cat taking a bath. Hopefully she won't be too rude. So, FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency. The following is a transcript of an audio tape with an urgent message to people from William Cooper on the subject of H.R. 4079. We must stop the traitors now. William Cooper dictated this information to me by phone in early 1990, and I tape recorded the information as he gave it. I made many tapes and sent them out exactly as Mr. Cooper has asked me to do, and those recipients have done the same. My name is Richard Murray, and I believe that William Cooper is the only man in America outside the secret government who truly knows what is happening and what it means to us, the average American citizen. So the tape begins. There's a guy by the name of Buster Horton. He's a member of FEMA, and he's a member of the interdepartmental unit, which is empowered in the event of a national security emergency to become the unelected national government, a sort of FEMA secret government, so to speak. A pretext for invoking these emergency measures can be found almost daily in the newspapers. It can be anything from the suspension of debt payments by the high bureaus of American countries to mass runs on U.S. commercial banks. That didn't make sense. It can be anything from the suspension of debt payments by the high bureaus of American. I think he means states. He says American countries, but there's only one. So there's got to be. I'm not too sure. I won't change the man's names, or words, but it doesn't make sense to me. Hi, Linda. How you doing? So it can be anything from the suspension of debt payments by the high bureaus of American countries to mass runs on U.S. commercial banks. And that's an issue, by the way, that's being handled personally by the National Security Council and Brent Scowcroft, to food shortages to drug war. This was 1991, just so you know. Obviously, Mr. Brent Scowcroft is no longer in power. The whole bit, anything, any disaster emergency declared at all, even including the oil spill from the Exxon tanker in Alaska. If the president has declared a national emergency, that could have triggered it. Any instability in the Middle East, anything in fact. and they've already tested their capabilities in April 1984 with Rex 84A. And that was designed to test the readiness of U.S. civilian and military agencies to respond to a serious national security crisis. Now, the executive order that will implement this, Executive Order 11051, details responsibilities to the Office of Emergency Planning, or FEMA. It gives authorization to put all executive orders into effect in times of national emergency, any declared by the president, increased international tension, or economical or financial crisis. Note that it covers every conceivable domestic crisis, but does not even mention war or nuclear attack. Now, the only thing that has to happen for FEMA to be able to implement all the executive orders, emergency executive orders, is for the president to declare a national emergency of any type, as long as it's a national emergency. Executive Order 10,995 provides the takeover of the communications media. Here's a bunch of them. Executive Order 10997 provides for the takeover of all electric power, petroleum, gas, fuels, and minerals. Executive Order 10988 provides for the takeover of food resources and farms. Executive Order 10999 provides for the takeover of all modes of transportation, control of the highways, seaports, etc. Executive Order 11,000 provides for mobilization of all civilians into work brigades under the government's supervision. Executive Order 11,001 provides for governmental takeover of all health, education, and welfare functions. Executive Order 11,002 designates for the Postmaster General to operate a national registration of all persons. Executive Order 1103 provides for the government to take over airports and aircraft. Executive Order 11,004 provides for the Housing and Finance Authority to relocate communities, designate areas to be abandoned, and establish new locations for populations. Executive Order 11,005 provides for government to take over railroads, inland waterways, and public storage facilities. Now, all of these were combined under Nixon into one huge executive order, which allows all of this to take place if the president declares a national emergency, and it can be implemented by the head of FEMA, not by the president. The president has already given him that power under these executive orders. That's pretty interesting. So all of those powers were made into one big executive order by Nixon. The only way it comes into effect is if your president declares a national emergency. But as soon as the president declares a national emergency, it gets implemented by the head of FEMA, not by the president. Yeah, 1935, the 10,988. Every country west of the African continent is an American country. North, Central, and South America. Interesting. I didn't realize that. Huh. Gold, invest in gold. Heck yeah. I can't. I'm allergic to gold. I have to invest in silver, but, pretty darn close. So, yeah, that's interesting. I didn't realize. I thought America was just the one. Now I know. But, yeah, so it can only be implemented by FEMA, and the president already gave him the power under the executive orders. All of these were combined into Executive Order 11,490, and that was signed by President Carter on July 20th, 1979. That's the day before I was born. Ha ha ha. And it is, in fact, law. So if H.R. 4079 is passed And the president does what it says and declares a national emergency because of the drug situation, whether it's for 1 year, 5 years, 5 minutes, or forever. It doesn't make any difference. FEMA can then implement all of these executive orders, take over all the local, state, and national government, suspend the Constitution, and do whatever they want to do. Now what remember what North said during the Iran-Contra hearings. He said that they were prepared to suspend the Constitution of the United States. And he said if it hadn't been for their getting caught, that this would have happened. And all that did was delay it. This is what is still going to happen. Now they've nominated, and I think he's been appointed, Major General Calvin Franklin, who's the head of FEMA. He was nominated because of discussions proposing the removal of the implementation of the National Guard in Washington, D.C., and Major General Franklin is or was the commanding general of the District of Columbia National Guard. Now, you've got to know that the National Guard would be of no help at all in combating drug traffic in Washington, D.C., or anywhere else. The primary effectiveness of the National Guard is in controlling mass civil disorders. I know, IP, it's really weird. Being allergic to gold. We found out my mom got my ears pierced. I wasn't even a full year old. She got my ears pierced with lovely golden teddy bear shaped studs, and I had a reaction so bad. And even now, I mean, this is my well, it was an engagement ring once upon a time. I've been long divorced, but it's got a small band of gold in the center, and that took me forever to get used to wearing. At first, I would even get a bit of a rash from it, like really, really itchy. Um, but I've always been that way, so I'm a cheap date too. No gold for me, and I'm not really a huge fan of diamonds either. They're pretty boring. Another Crease and Carter's POS. Yes, yes, yes. Cynthia says it's probably pissing off Harris that legally she's not in charge. She's just trying to appear that she is. The head of FEMA, though, is a puppet. Well, and see, he'll get there. Somehow better than Biden, somehow. Yeah, because you never know who's putting what in front of Biden to be signed. And we know for a fact that he's not reading it. He doesn't have any idea what's actually going on. But yeah, right now, is it you guys are in a national disaster, right? This, like, he is called for this, right? So what? Yeah. So if you guys are in a national emergency right now, what's stopping the head of FEMA under this executive order to take over everything? And I wonder why, instead of doing that, they are instead impeding upon and completely stopping aid into the areas that need them, But then it's also interesting that when you read what they were set up to do, national emergency in the form of weather was not mentioned at all. We just read about banks and drugs and instability in the Middle East, but not once yet have we heard anything about national emergency due to weather, which is weird because that's kind of what I thought FEMA was actually for, was to take care of natural disasters within the country. But that's the one thing that hasn't been mentioned yet. So maybe they're not supposed to be out there helping people right now. I don't know why they're out there stopping other people from helping. That doesn't make any sense. But maybe they're not meant to be out there helping. The way Harris blue screened in real time was on CNN the other day was pretty funny. Oh, I missed that one. I loved her 32 days, 32 days, 32 days. That was fun. Real gold. Real gold. No, the more gold, the higher the gold carats in the gold, the more I react to it. Um, yeah, it's funny. I even tested uh, my ex got a gold ring, or sorry, not ring, bracelet. Um, and we tested it by putting it on my wrist to see if I reacted or not. Didn't react very much. A little bit, but not very much. It wasn't really all that good gold. Okay, I see what you mean. It's not a national emergency yet. It's just certain specific states um, so far. Okay. So right now it's not FEMA's job. It's still up to the states to help themselves. Okay. They've taken over everything. AP says, and people are telling the authorities to pound sand and still helping regardless. I know, and I love it. That makes me feel the same way I felt when I saw the truckers leaving BC and heading out to Ottawa. It's just such a I love it. I love it so much. Real people helping real people, and fuck the government and all of their shit. I love it. It's so great to see that the average citizen um, is still a good person and is still willing to go out of their way to help. It's amazing. Yeah, that's true, Linda. They don't know how to help because they're the government. All they're good for is creating problems they already have solutions to. AP says it's very odd. Pure gold shouldn't give a reaction. I know. Believe me, I know. It's very weird. Um, but it is. And AP says FEMA is out of money, so they can't really do anything. They're out of money. Okay, I didn't realize that. Don't they have all sorts of supplies stocked in advance? They've got stockpiles of coffins and camps and stuff like that, all waiting ready. Or maybe they spend all their money on that crap, and that's why they're out of money now. Yes, Linda, leave it to the redneck rescuers. Yes, that's why you really need to know your neighbors in real life. You need to make friends with the people you live around, because when there's that kind of an emergency, daddy government's not going to help you. Your friends and family across the country can't help you. It's going to be you, yourself, and whatever neighbors that can get together and help each other. Yeah, FEMA's been confiscating non-contracted supplies. They said spent 600 billion for nothing, useless organization. And all the FEMA stuff is for the illegals. I had heard that too, that they'd spent a lot of their money on the illegals, which is why they weren't doing as much. But it's all just a big clusterfuck, as Nick likes to say. And you can't unfuck a clusterfuck. You just got to wade in and start cleaning up. So I'm so glad to see that. I am so glad. I've got a friend, a church friend. He's older. I think he's just turned 70, so not old, but he's older than me. Himself, his dog, and his three cats. Um, from what I understand, he's pretty much lost everything. Um, they're able to get internet now. He was able to get out and get some hot food at one point. Pardon me. And I know that he made contact from, I believe it was a Walmart at one point too, when he could get cell signal. So, we're talking to him, and we know he's okay, but that's all. He's got himself, his dog, and his three cats. That's it. North Carolina. And I've got three friends, at least three friends that I know of that were in the storm that hit last night. So I haven't checked on them because I didn't want to. I quite frankly am not ready yet. At least in Florida, though, That's one thing DeSantis is brilliant at. He's prepared in advance so that it's easier to help everyone in the aftermath. He's shown his ability to get things done when needed in the past, and I'm sure just seeing what he was doing leading up to it, I'm sure Florida is going to be in a much better state to recover than North Carolina and some of those other places. It's I guess that that's what the governors are for, and he's doing right by them. It sounds like. Yeah, AP says Ukraine will get another 10 billion to fight a proxy war or money laundering back to the administration. Yeah. Linda says my heart is broken for those people. I know. I can't imagine. Um and like I said, I of all the natural disasters, I'm glad I live where I live because I've got to deal with fire, and I know how to what to do in when fires are coming up, and I know how to take care of myself. Um, I can't imagine living anywhere where a tsunami or a hurricane, tornadoes, earthquakes, like I can't. Those are things you can't really do as much for, right? Like with fire, you get advanced warning, and you've got, at least you've got hours um, to get up and get going. And I always have a fire bag ready. Um, just in case. But I just can't fathom the fear living through some of those sorts of things. I couldn't do it. Give me fire any day. Cynthia says Florida is the only state where all the dumps are open 24/7. All the other states, FEMA closed them. Oh, interesting. I know he did something to make sure they were open 24/7. Now, did FEMA just close them at regular hours, or are they like closed? AP says I have family in Milton's damage path in Fort Myers and Melbourne, both sides of the state. Water for controlling it and some more supplies after that. Well, see, that's it. It's fire is you can plan for it. You can be prepared for it. Like I've got my exit route, that little tiny creek there. All I have to do is follow it down and I'm at the lake. And then all I have to do is find something floatable. And me and the cats are going to be hanging out in the lake, and we're good to go. There's one of those big floaties with the AstroTurf on top, just floating in the middle of the lake. We get there, we're good. So, yeah, I can handle that. Oh, do yeah, I guess you get days for warning with the hurricanes. Tornadoes, yeah, they're more instantaneous and kind of sudden. Um, and aren't I was just looking into this. Tsunamis and hurricanes are the same thing, I believe, just depending on which ocean you're in. Definitely needs more supplies for fires. Yes, everything is closed, Cynthia. That's ridiculous. Holy. Yeah, tornadoes happen just like that. They're a whole different species. All right, so I turned to the page. Let's see. So yeah, they were talking briefly about the National Guard, specifically the Washington, D.C. The primary effectiveness of the National Guard is in controlling mass civil disorders. So, on March 24th, President Bush issued a new executive order delegating to the director of FEMA powers which were vested in the president by the Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act of 1988. And although the order is described by the White House as simply a technical matter, in reality, the revision delegates to the FEMA director direct responsibility for a large number of items which were earlier only the president's prerogative. And that includes responsibility, oh, that's the cat, for general federal assistance, federal emergency assistance, hazard mitigation, individual and family grants programs, and the power to direct other federal agencies to assist in an emergency. And that's the key. All other federal agencies will come under FEMA. Of course, the president retains the power to actually declare an emergency, but as soon as he does that, the implementation of the measures utilized will be transferred directly to the director of FEMA. The brains behind this contingency plan for a police state were the members of a Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission. We've heard of them before, haven't we? Both of which Bush is a member. We're talking Bush Sr., remember. Brent Scowcroft, National Security Advisor, who was a member of FEMA's advisory board until he was appointed by Bush to head the National Security Council, is a member of the Trilateral Commission and also a business partner of Henry Kissinger, who has been a traitor to this country for many, many years. And of course, Scowcroft would become the superior to FEMA in the chain of command of the national security emergency whenever it's declared. The FEMA Advisory Board is dominated by Professor Samuel P. Huntington. In 1978, Huntington drafted for Jimmy Carter Presidential Memorandum 32, which led to the creation of FEMA in 1979. Well, thank you, Mr. Huntington, Professor Huntington. He happens to be a Harvard professor. He wrote the seminal piece for the Trilateral Commission in the mid-1970s, recommending that democracy and economic development be discarded as outdated ideas. He wrote, as co-author, the book Crises in Democracy. We have come to recognize that there are potential desirable limits to economic growth. There are also potentially desirable limits to the indefinite extension of political democracy. A government which lacks authority will have little ability short of cataclysmic crisis to impose on its people the sacrifices which may be necessary. Yeah, CAP. I'm Pacific, so they're tsunamis. Not that we've gotten one here at any time, but it would be a tsunami that hits Vancouver Island and Vancouver's coast. Tsunamis can be stronger because the water is warmer in the Pacific. Yeah, which is insane. I've never been in the Atlantic, never seen the Atlantic live, but the water in the Pacific is not warm. So I can't imagine. Oh, all of Huntington's ideas were rewritten. It's going to be one of those days, right? The contractors that went around and filled up dumpsters were told to go back and dump them in people's driveways. The rats were partying in the trash. Well, yeah. And AP says Harvard professor shockingly doesn't want democracy. I know, right? Ironically, the U.S. is not a democracy and never has been. Yeah, well, tell that to your leaders. And tell that to your kids in schools, in public schools. They have no idea how lucky they are. That's the one good thing about being in Canada. I mean, I would never run away from Canada. I'll stick it out to the end. I love BC too much. But if the worst came to worst and I had to run, at least you guys are right there. And as it stands right now, as long as I come across the right part of the border, I can get set up for life. So all of Huntington's ideas were rewritten into National Security Decision Directive 47, which is in NSDD 47, and that was enacted by President Reagan on July 22nd, 1982. Why are they doing all this stuff right around my birthdays? July 20th, July 22nd. My birthday's the 21st. I wonder, are they making these sort of are they doing these sort of things in July because everyone's on holiday and maybe people won't not as many people will realize, kind of doing it on the sly. My commandant Turdo is decided he wants to close Parliament early, which would effectively shut down any chance we have of calling an election and getting rid of the fucker until next spring. So the water near BC is cold as hell. Yeah, I learned how to kayak and how to, when you get flipped over in your kayak, how to right yourself in a glacial lake. It was not fun, but I learned fast. Tsunamis like hurricanes start in warm waters, losing strength as the cell passes over cold water and land. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I've never lived in anything like that, thank goodness. All right. So President Reagan on July 22nd, 1982, enacted NSDD 47. It identified important areas to be upgraded, such as the nation's industrial base to maintain the national defense, but it nonetheless, and this is very important, laid out the groundwork for secret government's options to institute a police state, and its title is Emergency Mobilization Preparedness. It ordered preparedness measures that involved the waiving of modification of socioeconomic regulations that delay emergency responses and that should receive priority attention. It also specified that preparedness measures that are or may be impeded by legal constraints be identified in the priority task that lays the groundwork for the suspension of the Constitution. Make copies of this tape if you want to, but you don't even have to transcribe it. Ugh. Make copies of this tape if you want to. You don't even have to transcribe it if you don't want to, but get this out to the people. It's important that they understand that if H.R. 4079 is passed, their history. They won't pass it if we get this out to the people and tell them that this is what they're doing. Most people don't even know about it, and that's to the secret government's benefit. If we get this out and tell people what they're doing, then people can get on the phone and then go down and kick their congressman's ass, which is what they should have been doing years ago, and get this thing thrown out of Congress. And the next thing they need to do is throw their congressmen and their senators out of Congress and keep them out of Congress and put their neighbors in there, people they can trust, and keep them in there for only one term. The Constitution is in serious danger. This has nothing to do with the right wing, left wing, or any other damn thing. It has to do with the Illuminati taking over this country and joining it and joining in the New World Order. When you give this out to people, make sure they agree to make 10 copies and send them to all their friends. And that's the end of the tape. I decided that the transcript of this tape says it all. Why write it again? So, H.R. 4079. As of this writing in 1991, H.R. 4079 is still in committee. Excuse me. I got a froggy in my throat. I haven't drank enough coffee yet. Hello, Hobo. How you doing, hun? Cynthia says, if you ever need to run, you can always come to my house. You pretty much know where to find me. Yeah, I think if I can get into California, I'll be good. AB says, has been for a very long time, well before we were born. Yeah. So as of this writing, H.R. 4079 is still in committee and has not been subjected to a vote. It is one of the most deceptive and dangerous pieces of legislation to go in front of the Congress in many years. It must be stopped at all costs. You must call your representative and stop this bill. H.R. 4079 has included within its pages two provisions that are meant to divert attention from the fact that the bill would declare a state of national emergency for 5 years and would allow FEMA to literally take over local, state, and federal government. This means that the Constitution of the United States could be suspended. The diversions used are terrible if allowed to sneak through. One is a clause that would eliminate the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution, and the other would eliminate the Eighth Amendment to the Constitution. The diversion would cause heated argument over these two provisions, resulting in some sort of compromise while allowing the declaration of a 5-year state of national emergency to sail right through Congress and become signed into law. If that happens, it's goodbye USA, hello New World Order. Call your congressman and insist that he or she deliver into your hands a complete copy of H.R. 4079 immediately. Do not take no for an answer. Read it and defeat it. And added before the press time of this book, H.R. 4079 may have been secretly passed, just as SB 2834 was passed, and H.R. 4079 may be Public Law 101-647, signed into law by President Bush on November 29, 1990. If this has occurred, then we are already subject to a FEMA takeover. I'm attempting to acquire a copy of PL 101-647. This late-breaking news was furnished by a congressional staff member and has not been verified as of January 8, 1991. All right. And he's got some sources along with the sources from the other one that I forgot to add in. I will put those in the description. I can write it there. There we go. Sources. How you doing? Hello, Fallen. How you doing, hon? All right. Well, here we go. Author's note. The following report by Dr. Pabst concerning FEMA and concentration camps in the United States is photographed and printed exactly as written. So, in the United States, a national emergency, total takeover. This is Dr. William R. Pabst. He's giving his address in Houston, Texas. He's giving his phone number. And he says, this is my, you guys don't need that. This is my 1979 updated report on the concentration camp program of the Department of Defense of the United States. Yeesh. Outdoors with a stogie. Nice. Nice. It's actually, you can tell my my blinds are closed, the sheet is drawn, and still my window is glowing. It's beautiful outside today. On April 20th, 1976, after a rapid and thorough investigation, I filed suit on behalf of the people of the United States against various personages that had a key part in a conspiratorial program to do away with the United States as we know it. This is a progress report to you, the plaintiffs, you, the people of the United States. The civil action number is 78-H-667. It is entitled Complaint Against the Concentration Camp Program of the Department of Defense. It was filed in the U.S. District Court of the Southern District of Texas, Houston Division. The judge responsible for the case was Judge Carl Bue, B-U-E. You have now no doubt heard the story. Once upon a time, under the Nazi regime in Germany, a man worked on an assembly line in a baby carriage factory. His wife was going to have a baby, but the Nazi government would not let anybody buy a baby carriage. The man decided he would secretly collect one part from each department and assemble the carriage himself. When this was done, he and his wife gathered up the pieces and assembled it. When they were finished, They did not have a baby carriage. They had a machine gun. And that is exactly the situation that I'm going to present to you at this time. The Center for the Study of Democratic Institutions recently completed a proposed constitution for the new states of America. The center is Rockefeller funded. To give you an indication of the type of constitution proposed, the term national emergency is mentioned 134 times. The document did not have a Bill of Rights, and the right to own arms was taken away. At the same time, the House Concurrent Resolution number 28 awaited for calling a constitutional convention on or before July 4th, 1976. The presiding officer of such an event would have been Nelson Rockefeller, Vice President and President pro tem of the Senate. This particular resolution awaited in committee. Obviously, money would not be spent on these massive programs unless there would be the chance for the actual implementation of such a scheme. All right, just seeing as I've said that name twice, remember, pinned at the top in YouTube is the Rumble link. If I disappear, you know where to go. However, in case the American people do not voluntarily adopt a new constitution less troublesome to those who desire dictatorship, there is Executive Order number 11490, which will include its predecessors when it is cited herein. The executive order authorizes the secretaries of the various agencies to prepare for any national emergency type situation, including but not limited to those specified in the executive order itself. If you read the order, which we just did, there is nothing at all left to the imagination. For any conceivable pretense of national emergency may be declared based upon this frightening decree dated October 1969. The order itself was prefaced in March of 69 by another executive order which established the federal regions and their capitals. My cat's doing weird stuff. The order itself was prefaced in March 69 by another executive order which established the federal regions and their capitals. All the departments of the government were involved, including the LEAA, Law Enforcement Assistance Administration, and the HEW, Health, Education, and Welfare. Congressman Larry McDonald has revealed to Congress that various guerrilla and terrorist groups were being financed by the federal government. If they, the terrorist groups, actually began insurgent activities, Executive Order 11490 would be activated. But as mentioned previously, if you will read Executive Order 11490, you will see that a national emergency may be declared for any conceivable pretense whatsoever. If the order itself were activated, here's what would happen. The next day, you and your family would be standing in front of your local post office with your neighbors, the front door bursting with block-long lines of people waiting to be registered. After waiting in line with your family for hours, you finally get channeled through the doors. Once inside, you overhear the postal clerk with the sidearm. I'm sorry, my cats are... What are you doing over there? Okay, they must have a bug or something because they're doing weird stuff. I'm sorry. I leave the camera wide open so you can watch them doing their weird stuff, and then they go hide in the corner there. Par for the course. After waiting in line with your family for hours, you finally get channeled through the doors. Once inside, you overhear the postal clerk with his sidearm on, telling a frightened resident, "Look, there's nothing I can do. The truck behind the building will take you to a work camp where you have been assigned. Your wife has been assigned to a factory and there's nothing I can do." Then your son or daughter looks up at you with a quivering voice and asks, Dad, why are we here? Implementing the new government. Well, you see, there's much more to life in a free country than paying your mortgage. You have to be aware of what is going on and act accordingly and participate in government. That is, get involved. Examining the organization chart on the Executive Order 11490 to discover how we have all helped finance, through our tax dollars, the mechanics of the overthrow of our Constitution, Executive Order 11490 designates certain authorities to the Office of Emergency Preparedness, which in turn designates authority to the various departments of the federal government. If order were implemented, the Post Office Department would be responsible for a national registration. The State Department would be responsible for protection of the United Nations personnel or property and the prevention of escape from the United States. The Department of Defense would be responsible for the expropriation of industry, direction of services, and national production system, control of censorship, and communication expropriation of non-industrial facilities. The Commerce Department would be responsible for expropriation, selection, and international distribution of commodities, which would be the actual looting of the United States, census information, and human resources. The Treasury Department would be responsible for collection of cash and non-cash items and the recreation of evidence of assets and liabilities. The Justice Department would have concurrent responsibility with the Department of State for prevention of escape from the United States, for replenishing the stockpile of narcotics, for a national police force, for correctional and penal institutions, for mass feeding and housing of prisoners, and for use of prisoners to augment manpower, which would be slave labor. What are you two doing? So with the activation of every round of my freedom dispensers, yes, yes. And again, that's, I love Canada, but you guys have got rights and freedoms that we do not have. And you've got to keep it. You got to fight to keep it. Right over the keyboard. Okay. Good, good. Well, at least she's on camera. Maybe she can entertain you guys. Because they're doing all sorts of weird stuff behind the camera. The federal bank, which is not a federal bank, would be responsible for regulation of withdrawal of currency. The GSA, General Services Administration, would be responsible for the confiscation of private property for government use. Health, education, and welfare would be responsible for nationalization of education, which the Department of Education has already done, health services, hospitals, and mental institutions. The Labor Department would be responsible for recruiting manpower, selecting manpower, referring manpower, and allocating manpower. So each particular person that was registered at the post office in this national registration would be told where he or she was going to work. HUD, or Housing and Urban Development, would be responsible for transfer of persons to temporary or permanent housing in regional emergency planning and cooperation. The Transportation Department is responsible for emergency enforcement and control and movement of passengers and the emergency operation of the Alaska Railroad. There are two specific agencies here that we need to look at and keep in mind. Oh, no. Oh, lovely. Chapter 6. Good, good, good. And it's tiny printing. Good. Oh, my goodness. Yes, turns out they were chasing a pencil. Oh, Boobery, why do you do this to me? Okay, I found it. You leave it have known. Okay. There are two specific agencies here that we need to look at and to keep in mind. They are HEW and Justice Department, as those two agencies are related to the Department of Defense. The various military departments are part of the Department of Defense, and under it we have the Secretary of Army, Chief of Staff, Deputy Chief of Staff of Personnel and Law Enforcement, the U.S. Army's Forces Command, and Continental Army Reserve and National Guard. And under that, we have the four armies dividing up the United States. Under the Fifth Army, we would have the Provost Marshal, who is directly connected to the Deputy Chief of Staff for law enforcement personnel. Under the Provost Marshal for the Fifth Army, we have the 300 Military Police Prisoner of War Command at Livonia, Michigan. At this point, I quote from retired Admiral Elmo Zumwalt's book on Watch. Kissinger states, I believe the American people lack the will to do the things necessary to achieve parity and to maintain maritime superiority. I believe we must get to the best deal we can in our negotiations before the United States and the Soviets both perceive these changes and the balance that occurs. When these perceptions are in agreement and both sides know the U.S. is inferior, we must have gotten the best deal we can. Americans at that time will not be happy that I have settled for second, but it'll be too late. Zumwalt said, then why not take it to the American people? They will not accept the decision to become second best while we are in a position of gross national product, twice that of the USSR. Kissinger responds, that's a question of judgment. I judge that we will not get their support, and if we seek it and tell that fact, as we would have to, we would lose our negotiating leverage with the Soviets. Zumwalt stated, but isn't that the ultimate immorality in a democracy, to make a decision for the people of such importance without consulting them? And Kissinger stated, perhaps, but I doubt there are 1 million who could even understand the issue. Zumwalt responded, even if that presumption is correct, those 1 million can influence the opinions of the majority of the people. I believe it is my duty to take the other course. Kissinger responded, you should take care lest your words result in a reduction in the Navy budget. So we see what the intention of the State Department is regarding the people. Another fact, on December 30th, 1975, the California National Guard announced in a press release, which I have, that the state's military police battalions were organized and trained to provide immediate response to virtually every civil and man-made disaster, as well as to assist law enforcement officers in emergency situations, to carry out their law enforcement as well as their military position. When I asked 4 of the defendants in this case for their mission statement, they did not provide it, although they say it's public information. The training spoken of for the California National Guard covers such subjects as dealing with individual civilians and the civilian population, detention procedures, citizens' rights, and similar matters. And you know as well as I do that where there is martial law or martial rule, citizens have no rights, because the Constitution is preempted. Even the uniforms of the National Guards who participate in this program are different from the regular uniforms. Army spokesmen will not reveal more about the uniforms, but the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department paramilitary units who have received this training also have Army fatigues dyed black for their uniforms. A further fact is the disaster preparedness plan for the Marine Corps Supply Center in Barstow, California. Quoting from that document, under the Constitution and the laws of the United States, the preservation of law and order is the responsibility of local and state government, and the authority to maintain the peace and enforce the law is invested in the authorities of those governments. There are specific exemptions to the above concept. One of these pertains to federal intervention to civil disturbances in certain situations. Military commanders are deemed to have the inherent authority to take any measure reasonably necessary for the protection of life and property in the event of a sudden, unexpected public calamity, which disrupts the normal process of government and presents an emergency so imminent as to make it dangerous to await instructions from appropriate authorities. This includes law enforcement duties. The manual mentions something called garden plot forces, which we will discuss at length in a few minutes. Don Bell, who writes a weekly report, reported on July 25, 1975, that in May of 1975, the 303rd Civil Affairs Group of the U.S. Army Reserves in Kearney, New Jersey, conducted an exercise to sharpen plans for a military takeover of the state government in New Jersey. According to Colonel Francis Clark, they conducted similar studies on how to seize municipal and county government over the past few years. But this was the first time they had studied state government. Such units were trained during World War II to operate captured governments in the foreign. We never had federal troops trying to take over governments in the United States. When local violence or catastrophe struck, the National Guard, under the command of the governor, went into action. This is definitely not the such situation at this time. That's for sure in certain places. Every run, yeah. Cats have been partying since I started. Yeah, I know. I can hear them. I think they've tired themselves out now. Prisoners with jobs, exactly. And like he said, when you get in the front of the line and the postmaster is taking your names down and your family members, they're going to split you up, and they don't give a crap if they're sending parents with their children or not, or husbands and wives together. They're not going to care. They're going to put you wherever they need you most. Reminds you of your boxer. She'd find something to mess with and vehemently do so just for attention from. Exactly. Boo is like, I'm touching her now. And she's eyeing that pencil that I put on the tray right here. But at least she's kind of calmed down. Animals do enjoy having us as pets. Yes, they do. Uh-huh. Boxers are my favorite type of dog. They really are. AB says this boxer was a sassy girl, had everyone wrapped around her paw except you. Would protest every time I told her to do something. She was hilarious. Yeah. Cynthia says what was just stated about the LA County Sheriff and our National Guard is in fact true today. I went to the Whittier Academy. I thought so. So you actually have some firsthand knowledge of more modern times and whether it's still in place. Like I was saying earlier, I really like the way Florida works. They're ready for natural disasters before they happen. So it's not scrambling when they happen. I'm quite impressed with that. So now we're at controlling the masses. On February 16th, 1975, in the San Gabriel Valley Tribune, it was reported that the LEAA, funded by the Department of Justice, and the Police Foundation, funded by the Ford Foundation, are prime movers towards implementing a national police force. Each, however, contends they support local police agencies. The total program invoices military units that have the function of taking over the administration of local and state governments. That program is Operation Cable Splicer by Army Civil Affairs Groups, a subplan of Operation Garden Plot, the martial law program. The method by which the national police concept is being presented to the public has changed. It was first disguised under the cover of protection against civil disturbances. This program was as follows. A. Keep the people from gathering in the streets. B. Isolate and neutralize the revolution's leadership. And C. Dispersal of crowds and demonstrators. This is followed by a successful prosecution in order to 1. Validate the action of police. 2. Denying the arrestees propaganda materials. And 3. Denying them the opportunity to recover money damages against the police for arresting them. Let me quote for you the scenario which was developed for Cable Splicer 1. Cable Splicer 1, 2, and 3. to justify the needs for dealing with civil disturbances. Phase 1, an arrest and shooting provoke the crowd unrest and threatens against public officials, and a riot begins to form. Phase 2, police vehicles are ambushed, various attempted assassinations of public officials occur, destruction and raiding of armories occur, and thousands of people begin to gather and local police lose control. Phase 3, increased movement of rioters and the crowds must be dispersed before they become sympathetic with the rioters. National Guard and the local police lose control. This scenario provides for an orderly transition from state to federal control. The Deputy Attorney General of California commented at Cable Splicer 3 conference that anyone who attacks the state, even verbally, becomes a revolutionary and an enemy by definition. They are the enemy and must be destroyed. This program was taught in almost every state west of the Mississippi River and included as participants local active military, reserve military, and civilian police. The course name was Civil Emergency Management Course. The official explanation that was to be given, if any questions were asked about the program, was this activity is a continuous joint law enforcement military in liaison. Bleh. It's funny, I can get through some words no problem, and there are other words that just stop me. This activity is a continuous joint law enforcement military liaison effort. I'm just skipping it. And a continuation of coordination established last year. In 1976, the Oakland Tribune carried the most complete explanation of what is planned. It is reported in its entirety in the National Chronicle, which added an analysis to the story. The Oakland Tribune's editor died suddenly after the story was published. And I quote, "Last Saturday, the California National Guard unveiled a new law enforcement assistance force, LEAF, a specially trained and outfitted military police unit whose members will serve as shock troops in the state's war against political protesters and demonstrators. I saw a full-dress exhibition of what the California National Guard has planned for the next American Revolution. Helicopters, SWAT teams, civilian military policemen in jackboots and helmets, 12-gauge shotguns, 38 and 45 caliber pistols, radios, walkie-talkies, and electronically controlled intelligence centers wired for instant communications with any police force in the state. LEAF is a 1,000-member unit put together this year to handle unique law enforcement problems, such as mass civil disobedience, protest demonstrations, and riots. In other words, breaking heads and taking names. LEAF has the support of Governor Brown, $250,000 worth of grants from the federal government, and no public opposition from civil liberties groups. For all its ineptitude, however, LEAF has a frightening possibility from a civil liberty standpoint. It is a direct product of the California Cable Splicer Conferences, a series of high-level secret meetings between government officials, law enforcement officers, and military planners held during the late 60s and early 70s. The meetings were held as late as 1975, so far as many public records show. These were the conferences which Counter Spy magazine had identified as California's Garden Plot subplan. Gary Davis, Governor Brown's right-hand man, says LEAF is to assist civil police, not replace them. Gary says civilians could expect a civilian-type law enforcement rather than what is commonly known as martial law. Despite this assurance, LEAF's exercises look disturbingly like a military coup described in the novel 7 Days in May. LEAF soldiers with nightsticks stood at intersections, stopping cars with suspicious occupants, checking ID cards, and generally intimidating onlookers with their SWAT-style uniforms, their sidearms, and helmets. Perhaps more ominously, several participants in the role-playing exercises Saturday admitted that, even under simulated pressure, There had already been a number of incidents where the relief troops used excessive force to quell disturbances, even though their orders forbade it. End of quote. Former Relief Administrator Charles Roscoven is on record as having stated that local law enforcement has failed and must be replaced by a national police force. Patrick Murphy, the administrator of the Police Foundation, states, "I have no fear of a national police force. Our 40,000 police departments are not scared." The ex-Attorney General William Saxby warned that if we can go on as we are, crime will invade us and national police will take over. For the policemen who do not cooperate and still want to be policemen, there is the Program of Contemporary Research Incorporated, an organization of psychologists, sociologists, education specialists, economic experts who work towards a solution of many of today's social problems. The same organization develops specialized computer programming for the new worldwide military command and control system, as well as computer-based systems for law enforcement agencies at all levels of government. The LEAA alone will receive over $1 billion a year over the next 4 years, even though it has been ineffective against crime. This is because the LEAA is not geared to fighting crime. It's geared to developing a system for takeover of the United States with the assistance of the Department of Defense. Yoicks. I know, liaison. See there, now I can say it. Like, I know these words and then I just stumble. It's the weirdest thing. Harris is telling everyone that the government doesn't control the weather. See, I'm of a part mind of it. I don't think they can control. See, this time I did it to myself. I don't think they can control weather to the point that people think that they can, like pinpoint a specific type of storm at a certain level of strength and aim it and make it hit exactly where they want it to hit. I don't think they can do that. I do think living in BC right beside HARP, I do think they've been messing with the weather and with weather modification forever. I have no doubt that they can manipulate the weather to a certain extent. I highly doubt they can control the outcome of those storms, and I highly doubt they can, land it with pinpoint accuracy. I wouldn't be surprised if these horrible storms are caused by all the different weather manipulation happening in the world, because the States, Canada, we're not the only ones. Everyone's doing it. And it's going to affect weather worldwide. So I wouldn't be surprised if weather modification had something to do with it, but I don't think they made this specific storm to hit this specific place at this specific time. I don't think they can do that. They're just toddlers playing in a sandbox and they have no idea what they're doing. It's like CERN. They're just playing. They have no idea what the outcome's going to be, and they honestly don't give a crap. I am at least half convinced that they pushed us into another timeline. It's just the ridiculousness. Hi, Tammy. How you doing? All right. So now we're going to look into the planned police state. One of the programs the LEAA works on its fight against crime is psychosurgery. If you don't cooperate with their programs, you are merely operated on so that you be as cooperative as an adding machine. Or the LEAA supports drug research for the same purpose, to neutralize neurological sources of violence. Hence, as an example, if a law were passed whereby the ownership of firearms was declared to be illegal, you would be placed in one of these programs if you did not cooperate. The LEAA control exercise at the state's level is from the Office of Criminal Justice Planning and the government's office. Here in Texas, Mr. Robert C. Flowers is still the executive director in that office, but all states have that particular department. In May 1975, the LEAA newsletter describes the function of one of its organizations, the National Institute of Law Enforcement and Criminal Justice. This organization funds something called the United Nations Clearinghouse in Rome, Italy. The function of that organization is, among other things, the exchange of criminal justice system information with the Soviet Union. And it goes without saying that we have nothing to learn from the criminal justice system of the Soviet Union. These incredible projects are being funded with our tax dollars. The code name for these projects are Garden Plot and Cable Splicer. Garden Plot is the program to control the population. Cable Splicer is the program for an orderly takeover of the state and local governments by the federal government. An investigation was completed in November 1975 by 4 sources: the conservative publication American Challenge, the leftist New Times, the Foundation Financed Fund for Investigative Journalism, and Don Wood of the trustworthy Ozark Sunbeam. It involves the potential creation of a police state through the use of the Pentagon and its computerized intelligence dossier lodged in the Pentagon basement, of thousands of citizens by the National Guard, state and local police departments, the LEAA, plainclothes military forces, SWAT teams, and the Department of Justice. Brigadier General J.L. Julenik, senior Army officer of the Pentagon National Guard Bureau, has admitted, "I know of no state that did not have some form of these exercises within the last year." Today, the Cable Splicer Handbook is composed of 6 loose-leaf 3-ring binders that are merely an outline for the impending takeover and destruction of our Constitution. The 6th Army used the term Cable Splicer for the name of the operation, but it has not revealed the name of the operation in the other military areas within the U.S. On page 4, paragraph 10, on public information, the instructions state, "As a means to prevent adverse publicity or misleading psychological effects in regard to coordinating, planning, and conducting this exercise, all military participants involved will perform such duties in civilian clothing. When exercise-oriented activities are conducted at law enforcement facilities, in the event inquiries are received regarding this exercise, the response should be limited to identifying the activity as a continuous joint law enforcement military liaison effort and a continuation of coordination established last year." On page 6, security guidance is explained to the effect that if anybody asks any questions, limit the information that is given out on the basis of it being in the interest of national interest or national security. Now, in the festivities celebrating the success of completion of the exercises, General Stanley R. Larson, the commanding general of the 6th Army, stated, "The most serious challenge facing all of us will be the challenge of discharging our legitimate responsibilities. For a significant proportion of society at large is likely to regard us with suspicion and to question and even challenge our authority on the basic assumption of our profession. Part of this challenge we must be prepared to deal with, a potentially dangerous position of our society which, in truth, could well become the domestic enemy." The manual includes instructions on operation of confinement facilities, handling and processing of prisoners, including searching, transporting, feeding, housing, and handling of the special class of persons called detainees. The plan also specifically includes a proposition for confiscation of privately owned weapons and ammunition. Friend from church, not so much. She's in the emergency room. Okay, well, I will put her in my prayers. Tell me, friend, emerge. I'll put her in my prayer list, hon. I'm glad you're doing okay, though. So, Now we get to the files on potential prisoners. The Army has over 350 separate record centers containing substantial information on civilian political activities. Virtually every major Army unit has its own set aside from this. The 5th Army of San Antonio has over 100,000 files of its own. The overall Operation Command Post is a domestic room at the Pentagon. There are 25 million cards on individuals and 760,000 on organizations held by the Defense Center Index for Investigations alone. And this information includes political, sociological, economic, and psychological profiles. All of this type of information on 25 million Americans. Since 1970, local, county, and state police forces all over the country have undertaken crash programs to install various kinds of computerized information systems. A large portion of this is being paid for by the LEAA. Beginning in 1970, Congress and the Joint Chiefs of Staff ordered the destruction of all these data banks, but they were not destroyed. All the outlawed collection is now located at Mount Weather, Clark County, West Virginia, and similar Pentagon facilities designated as adjuncts to the President's emergency powers under the executive orders. The cadre of specialized persons to enforce this plan are found in the U.S. Army Reserves Military Police POW Command at Livonia, Michigan. Mr. Finneran of the 300th Military Police POW Command at Livonia told me when I called him from the Federal Information Center at Houston that the camps in the command were for foreign prisoners of war and for enemies of the United States. I asked him if enemies of the United States included U.S. citizens. He became angry, wouldn't deny it, and referred me to the very sinister individual at the Army Reserve facility here at Houston, who I talked to, who explained to me that the prisoners were called inventory and internees. He would not deny that the camps were for U.S. citizens. I called the Pentagon, spoke with the defendant there, and then with the Provost Marshal for the 5th Army, and you know what? Not one of these persons would deny that the system was for U.S. citizens. The Provost Marshal for the 5th Army, when I mentioned the names of all the campsites, said, "Well, at least you've got that right." The names of the detention facilities that I gave him were a list that I had acquired from the Ozark Sunbeam. That list of names was the same list of facilities designated under the old Detention Act of 1950 as emergency detention centers. But there is only one problem. That act was supposed to have been repealed in 1971. After some research, I found out what the problem was. One congressman, when the hearings were held for the repeal of the Emergency Detention Act, mentioned that there were 17 other bits of law that provided for the same thing. So it didn't matter whether they ever repealed the Emergency Detention Act, the public was in fact tricked by the Congress of the United States. Well, they're really good at doing that. That's why they do those huge, huge bills now, right? They put a zillion different subjects in each bill so that they can hide all the good stuff. Here are the designated sites. Tucked away in the Appalachian Mountains of central Pennsylvania is a bustling town of approximately 10,000 people. 15 to 20 years ago, it was a sleepy village of 400. Allenwood, Pennsylvania is linked to New York City by Interstate 180. It takes up approximately 400 acres and is surrounded by a 10-foot barbed wire fence. It now holds approximately 300 minimum security prisoners to keep it in shape. It could hold 12,000 people from one day to the next. 30 miles from Oklahoma City on the US 66 is El Reno, Oklahoma, with an approximate population of 12,000. Due west, 6 miles from town, almost inside of US 66, is a complex of buildings which could pass for a small school. However, the facility is overshadowed by a guardhouse which appears to be something like an airport control tower, except that it's manned by a vigilant uniformed guard. This is a federal prison camp or detention center. These camps are located near superhighways or near railroad tracks or both. The federal prison at Florence, Arizona could hold 3,500 prisoners. It is presently kept in condition by approximately 400 legally convicted prisoners. Wickenburg, Arizona is famous for its municipal airport, which was once government owned. It is now occupied by a private party. It is rumored to be capable of being taken back by federal government without notice. Now, there are a couple other of these facilities which are probably existing under the same arrangements. This particular rumor of instant taking back without notice has existed for about 9 or 10 years. The only way it can actually be established is by looking at the local contract for the Wickenburg Municipal Airport itself and the parties that have possession of it. As I previously mentioned, these names were ratified by the Provost Marshal of the Fifth Army, who is in charge of the 300th Military Police POW Command. He is the one who verified them. He said, as I mentioned before, well, at least you've got that right. Some of the other locations are Tule Lake in California, now in private hands. It can be retaken without notice. Some of the others, we have Mill Point, West Virginia. I couldn't find a thing on Mill Point, but in that area we have all kinds of prisons. Among them are Alderson, West Virginia, a women's federal reformatory, Lewisburg, West Virginia, a federal prison, Greenville, South Carolina, in Greenville County, is now occupied by the State Youthful Offenders Division. Even that is a mystery to the people of the area. At Montgomery, Alabama, we have a federal civilian prison camp at Maswell Air Force Base. Now, does that sound right? There's one at Tucson, Arizona, David Munson Air Base. In Alaska, we have Elmendorf at Elias Eelson Air Force Base. And that brings us to a facility in Florida called Avon Park, Florida. I sent a representative to see what was at Avon Park. He found the Avon Park Bombing and Gunnery Range, which is also listed at the 56th Combat Support Squadron of the U.S. Air Force, which is also listed as Avon Park Correctional Institute. No one is permitted entrance, and probably there is no overfly permitted because it is a bombing and gunnery range. This was one of the places ratified by the Provost Marshal of the Fifth Army. In 1976, as well as on March 20th, 1979, I went to the Sheriff's Department in Houston to see if our local Sheriff's Department had been infiltrated by these plans. Well, as it appears so. I was put in contact with Lieutenant Kiljan, who is in charge of some secret unit in the department. I asked him if he had participated in military training or in training with military personnel here in the Sheriff's Department. He denied it, and when I asked him if he would testify so under oath, he became angry and stated, "You're just an ordinary citizen. I don't have to tell you anything." I later discovered that the lieutenant is the ex-director of the Houston branch office of the U.S. Secret Service. Now, where does his money come from? The area is administered by the Houston-Galveston Area Council. In this regional government plan, each federal region is divided into state clearinghouses, and each state clearinghouse is divided into an area clearinghouse. And for our area, we have the Houston-Galveston Area Council. It serves as a conduit for federal funds in two major areas, LEAA and HEW. Most everybody thinks this organization, the Houston-Galveston Area Council, is for the development of the area, the geographical area here in Houston, but it's not. It is for the development of an LEAA and HEW projects. Now, this finds its counterpart in every community across the U.S. It provides for these agencies a liaison for intergovernmental communications, interaction, and coordination. I got it that time, first time out. All right. Mental cooperation in takeover plans. I examined their projects to see what they were doing. This regional government program distributes the federal funds for two major purposes. One, radio hookups between every police agency to to for Sam Houston. And two, mental health programs, including programs for the mentally ill having priority of beds and hospitals. Another interesting fact is to consider that the Pine Bluff, Arkansas arsenal B through Z is stored. It's a nerve gas which creates sleepiness, dizziness, stupor, and the incapacity to move about. According to the Associated Press, the agent can be sprayed by aerosol, injected, or sprayed over large areas by a bomb. The military has admitted that one potential use of the gas is for civilian control. So, whatever they have planned, they've also planned a way for you to go to your destination in a tranquil state of mind. HEW, by law, is operated in conjunction with the United Nations through the World Health Organization. Back in 1948, the International Congress on Mental Health, a UN organization, declared in its pamphlet Mental Health and the World Citizenship that prejudice, hostility, or excessive nationalism may become deeply embedded in the developing personality without awareness on the part of the individual concerned. In order to be effective, efforts of changing individuals must be appropriate to successive stages of the unfolding personality. While in case of a group of society, change will be strongly resisted unless an attitude of acceptance has first been engendered. Principles of mental health cannot be successfully furthered in any society unless there is progressive acceptance of the concept of world citizenship, the document states. Programs for social change to be effective require a joint effort of psychiatrists and social scientists working together in cooperation with statesmen, administrators, and others in positions of responsibility. The three phases of the development are: 1. Mental hospitals for segregation, care, and protection of persons of unsound minds. 2. Community mental health care centers so that persons may be treated in their own neighborhoods. And 3. Child care centers for dealing with early difficulties of nationalism in a child's life. 2 years earlier, Major General G.B. Chisholm, Deputy Minister of Health in Canada, that's why that sounded familiar. Oh, and surprise, yeah. Here we go. 2 years earlier, Major General G.B. Chisholm, Deputy Minister of Health in Canada, who later became Director of United Nations World Health Organization, explained, self-defense may involve a neurotic reaction, which means defending one's own excessive material wealth from others who are in great need. This attitude leads to war. So his solution to the problem is, let's redistribute the wealth among everyone. Whee! Yes, and this is late 70s. You can see how Canada got to where it is now, right? Further, the reinterpretation and eventual eradication of the individual's concept of right and wrong, which has been the basis of child training, are the belated objectives of practically all effective psychotherapies. That's not wrong. Now, if we digress even further to Buria, or phonetic spelling, the director of the Soviet secret police in the 1930s, we see that he explained the communist political strategy through the use of mental healings of psychiatry. Psychopolitics is the art and science of asserting and of maintaining a dominion over the thoughts and loyalties of individuals, officers, bureaus, and masses, and the effecting of the conquest of enemy nations through mental healing. You must work, he stated, until every teacher of psychology, unknowingly or knowingly, teaches only communistic doctrine under the guise of psychology. Well, yeah, that's that's kind of how we got here today too, eh? If you look at the Russian Manual of Instruction of Psychopolitical Warfare, we see in Chapter 9, psychopolitical operations should at all times be alert to the opportunities to organize for the betterment of the community mental health centers. Now, under the new National Mental Health Program at this moment, there are more than 600 of these community mental health centers across the United States. The whole thing was promoted by Dr. Stanley F. Yoles, who was the director of the National Institute of Mental Health in 1969. And he stated back then that the newest trend in treating mental illness is care at local healthcare centers, where the patient is not isolated from his or her family and friends. They have been working on this program for 46 years publicly, and now across the U.S., through your tax dollars. You have 603 centers, to be exact, community health centers that are all part of this program. And this is how they are part of the program. It's already happened. In the mid-1950s, there were set into motion an interesting chain of events. About 1956, the Alaska Mental Health Bill was proposed and later passed. It granted approximately $12 million and 1 million acres of public land, $12 million and 1 million acres of public land to Alaska so that it could develop its own mental health program. Now, this was a little abnormal since Alaska only had a little over 400 people who were classified as mentally ill. After the bill was passed, Alaska passed its own, enabling legislation to get into the mental health business. They started by adopting the essential elements of the Public Health Service Draft Act on the hospitalization of the mentally ill in the old Interstate Compact on Mental Health, now called the Uniform Mental Health Act. There were no provisions for jury trial in it or anything else. You would just be picked up and taken to the Alaskan Siberian Asylum, incommunicado, and the state would also confiscate all your personal and real property. And they actually tried to do it in 1954 in the case of Ford versus Milinak, which declared the act as adopted in another state, the state of Missouri, as unconstitutional. But the act itself still exists and modified, but essentially in the same form, the Uniform Mental Health Act, to which approximately 6 states subscribe. And in passing more state constitutions, if you will check them from the period of 1935, it made a part of their constitution the practice of having a person submit to a 90-day trial submit to a 90-day mental examination to determine his or her sanity without any provisions for a trial by jury. This was part of the national program at the time. In this act, the governor could have anyone picked up and sent to the mental health institution in Alaska or elsewhere. The results, as rumors back in the 1950s, were that there were in fact a sinister Frankenstein-type mental health prison in Alaska. I wrote to Alaska, or the officials that is, and asked them for a description of the land of 1 million acres that they were eligible to receive under the Alaska Mental Health Act. And I also asked them for a copy of the inventory they ran for their facilities back at the same time. Well, so far no answer, and probably I never will receive an answer without a court order. But through the years, there was a spot in Alaska that was continually referred to: southeast of Fairbanks, southwest of Fairbanks, northwest of Fairbanks, somewhere near Fairbanks. Then I received information that a pilot had flown over the area once and had had his license revoked. And so, for $1.85 each, I ordered the low-level navigation maps from the federal government for Alaska and located the Alaska Siberian Asylum for the treatment of enemies of the United States. It's right where rumor over the past 20 years has placed it, southeast of Fairbanks. It stands out like a sore thumb. It's the only one of that geometric configuration within the state of Alaska, and you will note a black line running up through Fairbanks and down over near that area of the map. That is the railroad that the Department of Transportation would take the emergency operation of under the executive order. If the executive order went into effect and HEW would be responsible for making a determination of whether or not you were mentally disturbed because of your nationalistic tendencies, your love for the United States, or your adherence to any political or religious doctrine. But let's look a little further into the type of program that the LEAA is paying for through the Department of Justice, the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Located in the backwoods of North Carolina near a tiny village called Butner, is constructing a mammoth 42-acre research complex for prisoners from throughout the East. Who will be sent for experiments to test new behavioral programs and techniques? Target date for completion of the entire system is, ironically, 1984. And so they're using it right now under the LEAA program, something called anectine. Punishment for troublesome behavior within the prison is being done by drugs and shock, likely to be the most selected examples of programs that have made use of anectine, a derivative of the South American curare. Anectine was originally used as a beginning factor to electroconvulsive shock. Such shocks applied to the head are so strong they can break and graze bones under the strain of resulting muscle contractions. Since anectine paralyzed the muscles without dampening consciousness or the ability to feel pain, by first injecting the inmates with it, researchers can turn up the voltage as high as they want without cracking the inmate's skeleton when his body is thrown into convulsions by the jolt. What the anectine does, in short, is to simulate death within 30 to 40 seconds of injection. It brings on paralysis first, with the small, rapidly moving muscles in the nose, fingers, and eyes, and then in the diaphragm and cardiovascular system. As a result, the patient cannot move or breathe and yet remains fully conscious, as though drowning and dying. This is from the 1974 publication Human Behavior. God only knows what they've got now. Okay, we're diving into the people versus the conspirators. The federal government answered my suit in June of 1976 by filing an unsworn general denial of everything I had alleged. I spoke with the assistant U.S. attorney in charge of the case and asked him if he had gone to the trouble to call any of the parties mentioned in the suits, since I had provided not only the addresses but their telephone numbers to provide a faster means of investigation. He said that he had not. He had not even done a minimal amount of investigation of the case, but yet he filed a denial of my allegations. I filed a motion in the meantime to take the deposition of the person who writes the training programs for the concentration camp guards, Mr. Richard Burrage, the 76th Maneuver Air Command at Army Reserve Center for Houston, Texas, stating that in light of all the recent activity of government agents, one of the agencies involved might attempt to murder this key witness, the author of the training camp program. The federal judge denied my motion, stating that I had not quoted enough cases to him justifying my request. However, he was also aware that there were no cases existing on this set of facts, but as you will see as I go along with this report, he chose to ignore it. I then made an agreement with the assistant U.S. attorney to take the deposition of Mr. Bullridge. After I'd made the arrangements, the U.S. attorney refused to voluntarily go along with taking the deposition. It is very difficult to find justice in our system of courts. Law is usually practiced by the buddy system, hence the court rules are overlooked or not followed. On July 29, a hearing was held at the Magistrate of Norman Black U.S. District Court in Houston. The courtroom was completely filled with spectators, and although the news media had been contacted, no representatives of the press were there. There is a new media blackout on this matter here in Houston. Brief oral arguments were presented. The U.S. attorney explained that I was not the proper person to bring the suit because Although the free exercise of my constitutional rights was threatened by the concentration camp program, as alleged, it did not constitute my injury. The magistrate was impressed with the information I had thus far collected and stated that he would bring it to the attention of the federal judge. The U.S. attorney tried to have my investigation of the case halted, but the magistrate would not go along that far with a prearranged decision. As an additional indication of what I was up against, the original hearing was scheduled for 10:30 in the morning. However, the U.S. attorney secretly had the time changed to 2:30 in the afternoon. The magistrate gave the U.S. attorney permission to file for a motion to dismiss because he felt that the concentration camp program to be used for persons who exercise their freedom of speech did not present any injury. How does that not present any injury? Now, on July 23rd, I had placed in the Houston Post and in the Houston Chronicle newspapers the following advertisement in legal section. Solicitation for witnesses in civil action 78-H-667, Federal District Court of Houston, People X Ray. People X Rel, William Pabst versus Gerald Ford et al. The action titled Complaint Against the Concentration Camp Program of the Department of Defense. Attention, if you have participated in the Operation Garden Plot, Operation Cable Splicer, the 300th Military Police Prisoner of War Command, or the Army Reserve Civil Affairs Group, you may be involved in a program that needs to be disclosed for this suit. To give your testimony, call or write, and here I placed my name, address, and telephone number. As I previously mentioned, there is a news media blackout on the story here in Houston. Both newspapers refused to carry the ad. First, at the Houston Post, I had to threaten them with a lawsuit to carry out the ad, even though I was paying for it. And then the Houston Chronicle, I had to meet with the president and various vice presidents because a refusal from that paper had come up from their own lawyers. Both newspapers finally carried it, but only after 2 days of complaining. The initial response of both papers was, "We don't carry stories like that," and "Don't you think that the people planning the concentration camps have our best interests in mind?" As you will hear for yourselves, the policies definitely do not reflect our best interests. The next event that occurred was the U.S. attorney filed a statement of authority showing the reasons that he could find why I should not be allowed to take depositions to get more information from the person who was writing the concentration camp guard training program. However, his brief was completely filed with misquotes of the law from many cases. He would mention the case and then invent whatever the case should say. In my brief to the court at this point, I notified the judge of the violation of the law requiring honesty in such matters. But the notification was ignored by the judge, who apparently sanctioned this most dishonest of acts, commonly known as quoting out of context. It's a good thing I like coffee cold. The Geneva Convention. My brief was filed in August 31st. Formal arguments were set. The new courtroom of the magistrate was almost filed again. However, no one from the news media showed up to this hearing either. The few who were contacted had been told not to go. They would lose their jobs. At the hearing, I introduced evidence that heretofore had never been introduced in any court of law in the U.S. The U.S. attorney had denied, you will remember, everything in my suit without so much as even a tiny investigation. So I introduced into evidence the following letter from the Department of the Army, Office of the Deputy Chief of Staff of Personnel, signed by 1B Sergeant Colonel G.S., Acting Director of Human Resources Development. The letter states, "On behalf of President Ford, I am replying to your letter 27 May 1976 regarding a new article in the Dallas Morning News. As much as he would like to, the President cannot reply personally to every communication he receives. Therefore, he has asked the departments and agencies of the federal government, in those instances where they have special knowledge or special authority, underlined. There are so many spelling errors in this section. For this reason, your communication was forwarded to officials for the Department of Defense. Within the Department of Defense, the Army is responsible for custody and treatment of enemy prisoners of war and civilian internees as defined under the terms of the Geneva Convention of 1949. Therefore, the Army is prepared to detain prisoners of war and detainees as defined in Article 4 of the 1949 Geneva Convention relative to the treatment of prisoners of war and protection of civilian persons. It is U.S. policy that its armed forces adhere to the provisions of international law to set the example for other countries of the world to follow and respecting the rights and dignity of those who become victim of international conflict. It should be noted that the Army program is designed for implementation during conditions of war between the U.S. and one or more foreign countries. The Army had no plans, nor does it maintain detention camps to imprison American citizens during domestic crises. The problem with this letter is that it's not true, and that's why I'm going to discuss it at this point. First of all, in verifying the authenticity of the claims in the letter, I checked the Geneva text. There is no article in the Geneva Convention entitled as the letter states. There is, however, on each one of the classifications, protection of war victims, civilian persons, and a separate article on prisoners of war. That was the first discrepancy. Then I turned to Article 4 of the Geneva Convention. That article did not set up any requirements or authorizations for military units of any type and does not even suggest it. Hence, the second discrepancy. The next problem with the letter from President Ford's representative is that it states that the Prisoner of War Guard program is set up for the implementation for conditions of war between the U.S. and one or more foreign countries. However, Article 3 of the Geneva Convention reads that the treaty applies to, and I am quoting, in case of an armed conflict not of an international character occurring within the territory of one of the high contracting parties. Obviously, an armed conflict occurring within one's own country did not mean between one or more parties to the treaty, especially if only one is involved. Now, the examples of this type of conflict are civil war, armed insurgency, and guerrilla activities. In other words, they're speaking of a domestic conflict. An even more shocking item is found in the last pages of the 1949 Geneva Convention under the protection of war victims' civilian persons. You will find the index card, the identification card, forms to be used to writing your family, and everything necessary for the administration of a concentration camp is contained in this treaty that the U.S. signed and ratified. Further, if there is a conflict in the U.S. involving only the U.S., this convention or treaty can go into operation, which includes the procedures for setting up the concentration camps. Oh, goodness, that's 5, 6. Okay, Article 608 of the convention states, and I paraphrase, if you commit an offense that is solely intended to harm the occupying power, not harming the life or limb of members of the occupying power, but merely talking against such a force, such as a martial law situation, you can be imprisoned provided that the duration of such imprisonment is proportionate to the offense committed. Well, President Dwight Eisenhower didn't feel that provision was strong enough. So he had the following additions placed in the treaty, which states, the U.S. reserves the right to impose the death penalty in accordance with the provisions of the Article 608 without regard to whether the offenses referred to therein are punishable by death under the law of the occupied territory at the time the occupation begins. So not only can you be imprisoned for having exercised freedom of speech, you can be put to death under the provisions of the Geneva Convention in 1949 for having exercised or attempting to exercise freedom of speech. I didn't know that. The next item that I introduced into evidence was a field manual, FM 41-10, Civil Affairs Operation. You will remember at the outset that I mentioned civil affairs groups. Let me quote you from that manual what one of the functions of the civil affairs activities includes. Item 4, assumption of full or partial executive, legislative, and judicial authority over a county or area. So let's see what a county or area is defined as in the same manual. It includes small towns and rural areas, municipalities of various population sizes, districts, counties, provinces or states, regions of national government. Nowhere in the manual does it exclude this program from being put into effect right here in the United States. As a matter of fact, in Kearney, New Jersey, the Civil Affairs Group went into that area and practiced taking over that government unit. And yet the Army, in its letter of June 16th, states these programs are not for us. Yet they are practiced here in the United States under conditions that can only occur here at home. The study outline of Field Manual FM 41-10 on page J24 under Penal Institutions 1-B, you see there is a program on concentration camps and labor camps, number, location, and capacity. It is important to note that a concentration camp and a labor camp are always located near each other for obvious reasons. Again, on page D-4 of the same manual, you'll find a sample receipt for seized property, a sample receipt written in English and containing terminology applicable to only U.S. territory. On page 8-2 of the same manual, under the heading Tables of Organization and Equipment, we find that there are 3 other organizations that will be working along with the civil affairs operation: the Chemical Service Organization, the Composite Service Organization, and the Psychological Operations Organization, along with the various civil affairs organizations. In July of that year, 1976, the following civil affairs groups met with the following airborne groups at a staging area in Fort Chaffee, Arkansas. A staging area is where military units meet before they go into action. They met at the 32nd Airborne and part of the 101st Airborne, the 321st Civil Affairs Group of San Antonio, Texas headquarters, the 362nd Civil Affairs Brigade from Dallas, Texas, the 431st Civil Affairs Company from Little Rock, Arkansas headquarters, the 306th Civil Affairs Group, and William Highland, the 486th Civil Affairs Company from Tulsa, Oklahoma, the 418th Civil Affairs Company from Kansas City, Missouri, the 307th Civil Affairs Group from St. Louis, Missouri, the 490th Civil Affairs Group from Abilene, Texas, the 413th Company from Hammond, Louisiana, the 12th SS Group, 2nd Battalion, headquarters unknown. They're ready to go into action. The problem is, as it appears, they were ready to take over the entire government of the United States as their mission set out. One man who attended the staging area talked to a civil affairs sergeant and asked him what his job was. The sergeant explained that the civilians of this country will really be surprised someday when the civil affairs groups begin to operate the government. Now, the Department of the Army still maintains that this is not for the United States. Yet this training continues here for us. The evidence is overwhelming. The plan exists for the imprisonment of millions of U.S. citizens. And even though all this information was presented to a federal magistrate, he still felt that no one was injured by such a plot. On the second day of September 1976, the magistrate recommended to the federal judge that the case be dismissed. And the sole basis for his reasoning to dismiss was that we have to be actually physically injured before we can maintain a lawsuit of this type. He did not feel that, although all this active planning preparation and training was going on, that any U.S. citizen had been injured, even though the citizen may fear exercising his or her freedom for fear of being detained and imprisoned in a concentration camp at a later date. Ignoring the Constitution. In the case of Tatum versus Laird, heard before the Supreme Court in 1974, is a case in point. It involved the Army intelligence collecting apparatus, which was developing a list of names of persons whom the Army felt were troublesome. The Supreme Court held that the making of lists of this type did not, in and of itself, present any injuries. The minority opinion in the case was that the injury in the case with programs such as this made people afraid to use their freedom of speech for fear of being sent to jail, but majority did not buy that argument. The difference between that case and this case, although we have the computer program, is that we have something much further past that point. The concentration camp guard program and the civil affairs program for the taking over of all functions of our government. In light of that, the federal judge said that this is not an injury. As a matter of fact, the U.S. attorney alleged that even if people were placed in concentration camps, if they were all treated the same, they would still not have the right to go to federal court. On the 20th day of September, I filed the memorandum to notify the magistrate and the federal judge that I had discovered that the federal government had a program for a number of years to suspend our constitutional right of the writ of habeas corpus. This information substantiated the complaint. Habeas corpus is the name of the legal instrument utilized to bring someone before a judge when that person is being illegally imprisoned or detained, so that he or she may obtain his or her freedom. The Constitution states that the writ of habeas corpus shall never be suspended. I found the disturbing information in a report 94-755, 94th Congress, 2nd Session Senate, April 26, 1976, entitled Intelligence Activities and the Rights of Americans, Book 2, on page 17-D, entitled First Amendment Rights. The report states that, more importantly, the government surveillance activities in the aggregate, whether expressly intended to do so, to deter the exercise of the First Amendment rights by American citizens who become aware of the government's domestic intelligence program. Beginning on page 54, it stated that, beginning in 1946, 4 years before the Emergency Detention Act of 1950 was passed, the FBI advised Attorney General that it had secretly compiled a secret index of potentially dangerous persons. The Justice Department then made tentative plans for emergency detention based on the suspension of privilege of the writ of habeas corpus. Department officials deliberately avoided going to Congress. When the Emergency Detention Act of 1950 was passed, it did not authorize the suspension of the writ of habeas corpus. But shortly after passage of that act, according to a Bureau document, Attorney General J.H. McGrath told the FBI to disregard it and to proceed with the program as previously outlined. A few sentences later, on page 55, it states, with the security index, use broader standards to determine potential dangerousness than those described in the statute. And, unlike the Act, Department plans provided for issuing a master search warrant and a master arrest warrant. This is the center importance. It is the same thing I am alleging in federal court, and yet the magistrate chose to ignore these facts also. We have government officials not only ignoring the will of Congress, but going the opposite of what the Constitution provides by planning illegally for the suspension of the writ of habeas corpus. In addition, as mentioned before, the master search warrant and the master arrest warrant are forms fed into the computer, which print the names and addresses on them from the tapes previously prepared by the intelligence gathering program. As you are arrested, your home will be searched and anything found there may be confiscated. This program has existed since 1946, up to and including 1973, and without proper access to judicial discovery techniques, It can't be determined whether the same plan now exists under the same name or under another name right now. This memorandum was filed on September 28th to make the court aware of the danger that our rights of freedom of speech and lawful assembly are in. But the court on September 30th, after this notification was received, dismissed the case. However, in keeping with the practice of federal courts in Houston of actively participating in the obstruction of justice, I was not notified of the dismissal until the 6th of October, which gave me just 2 working days to submit any further motion in a 10-day period before time starts running for the appeal. What I have just said regarding the federal courts in Houston is not my opinion. The Houston Chronicle, surprisingly, published an extensive document severely criticizing the federal courts in Houston for making up their own rules as they go along with the proceedings, as well as commenting on the communist-like Supreme Court attitude of the judges and the court personnel. My experience here has been that the court has returned to me almost every document I have filed. Then, after a glib argument, they re-accept the document, stating that they just made a mistake. In reality, the power structure doesn't want these types of cases in any federal court. Summary of evidence. On the 8th of October, I have submitted a request for finding the facts in the filing which had been established by the evidence presented. 1. The 300th Military Police POW Command is located in Livonia, Michigan. 2. The Department of the Army has stated that the command exists per se the Geneva Convention of 1949, a treaty of the U.S., Article 4 thereof under the title Relative to the Treatment of Prisoners of War and Protection of Civilian Persons. 3. No such title exists in the Geneva Convention per se. 4. Nevertheless, there are separate titles, one of which is A. Multilateral Protection of War Victims, Prisoners of War. B. Multilateral Protection of War Victims and Civilian Persons. 5. Nevertheless, Article 4 of both titles does not provide for the creation of any military programs for concentration camps. 6. Whether Mr. Fennerin of the 300th Military Police POW Command has stated that the purpose of the command is for the detention of foreign prisoners of war and enemies of the United States. 7. Further, Article 3 concerning civilian persons makes the treaty applicable to conflicts occurring solely within the territory of the United States that are not of an international character, which is capable of including any type of conflict in its description, whether it be civil war or guerrilla activity or anything else. The text states, in case of armed conflict not of an international character occurring in the territory of one of the high contracting parties, each party to a conflict shall be bound to apply to the minimum of the following provisions. 8. Department of the Army Field Manual FM 41-10, Civil Affairs Operations of Civil Affairs Organization Lists, as one of its functions, the assumption of full or partial executive, legislative, and judicial authority over a county or an area, and there's no specific exclusion of the United States as such a county or area. Said manual defines, this is 9, said manual defines country along certain geographical population bases, county, state, regions, and national government. 10. Said organization has, in fact, conducted practice takeovers of local and state governments in the continental United States, including but not limited to the state of New Jersey. 11. Said organization includes in its study outline on page J-24 a section on concentration camps and labor camps. 12. Said organization includes in its operations composite service operations and psychological operations organizations. 13. Said psychological operation, working with the U.S. Public Health Service, is prepared to operate any and or all mental health facilities in the United States as tools of repression against outspoken but nonviolent political conduct of the United States citizens, in conjunction with all of the above, which is to be used for the same purpose. 14. Further, the Department of Justice, in conjunction with this program, has had plans for the suspension of writ of habeas corpus since the year of 1946. Said plan depriving persons being detained under this total program any means for protection against tyrannical political repression. The plaintiff requested that the court make findings of fact and draw conclusions of law consistent therewith as shown by the evidence on record before the court. The effect of this request is that the case must go back to the district judge for further consideration. I mentioned that it appeared that all this planning for concentration camps was to be directed against anyone, regardless of his political persuasion or ideology, who exercised freedom of speech against the established power structure of international bankers and multinational corporations. But with Proposition 13 type movements threatening to reduce taxes throughout our nation, I foresee an activation of emergency programs so that the parasites in the federal take will continue to receive their checks. I think we pretty much saw that happen. Yeah, the Geneva Convention doesn't apply to U.S. citizens. We don't have to follow it at all. Yeah, you guys never, you never signed, or no, that was something else. Never mind. I'm going to confuse things. So, the price of patriotism. In the same Senate document on intelligence activities on the rights of Americans, referred to on pages 166 and 167, you will find that the federal government has targeted its intelligence activities against one group of Americans. On page 166, the first classification listed is rightists and anti-communist groups. And the first group on page 167 on Army surveillance lists, the John Birch Society as number 1 and the Young Americans for Freedom as the number 2 target. Therefore, the groups of U.S. American citizens considered to be the biggest enemy of the United States by the federal government at this time is the conservative patriots and those who assert the Constitution and individual rights. Although this information has been available since April of this year, 1979, no one has mentioned this incredible discovery that the federal government considers the patriotic conservative as its greatest enemy. I have received all kinds of information regarding this case from all across the United States. And the price of apathy. I obtained the 1945 report of the OSS, Office of Strategic Service, the precursor of the CIA, 7th Army William W. Quinde, Colonel, GFCAC of the G2, on the liberation of Dachau, a concentration camp during the liberation of Germany. It contains much groups of information, but the relevant portion of the report concerns itself with the section on the townspeople. Quoting from this report on why the people of this little town didn't complain or didn't overthrow oppressors, but just continued to go along and get along, even though they lost their freedom in the process, it states, these words crop up again and again. They are the rationalization of a man who admits that he was a member of the Nazi Party. I was forced to do so by business reasons, they state. We were lied to in every respect, but they admit they knew the camp existed. But they saw the work detail to the inmates passing through the streets under guard, and, in some instances, the SS behaved brutally, even towards the townspeople. When asked if they realized that within the last 3 months before the liberation, 13,000 men lost their lives within a stone's throw of where the people lived, they claimed they were shocked and surprised. When asked if they never saw transports of dead and dying pass through the streets along the railway, they referred only to the last one. They insist that most of the trains came in at night and that they were sealed cars. Did they never ask what was in the endless procession of cars that came in full and always went out empty? A typical reply was, we were told it was all army material and booty from France. It is established that anyone who stated that he saw only one train come in the daytime was telling a flat lie. There are quite a few such people in Dachau. Is it Dachau or is it Dachau? I've heard both. The analysis of the anti-Nazi element of the town. 1. The people knew what was going on in the camp, even 10 years prior to liberation. 2. The town did a thriving business from the concentration camp guard. 3. 90% are guilty and have dabbled themselves with the blood of innocent human beings. 4. The people are to blame for their cowardice. They were all too cowardly. They didn't want to risk anything. And that was the way it was in all of Germany. We're seeing that now too, aren't we? So you can see how the whole program is related here. My lawsuit was against one single aspect of the total program, the enforcement arm of the conspiracy, the people who make up the cadre that is going to occupy the concentration camps where enemies of the United States will be placed. Remember Solzhenitsyn's words in the Gulag Archipelago? Ha! See? I said his name, but I can't say that. Resistance should have begun right here, but it did not begin. You aren't gagged. You really can, and you really ought to cry out that arrests are being made on the strength of false accusations. If many such outcries had been heard all over the city, would arrests have no longer have been so easy? Those arrests would no longer have been so easy. They, the tyrants, can't work in the public eye. Those people who were so apathetic, hoping that nothing was really wrong, that nothing would happen to their persons and property, sat back and watched. The anarchists, financed by multinational interests, looted and pillaged their country. If you think that all that is necessary is to pay for your house notes, to pay for your TV notes, to go vote when there is an election, and to stand back during the rest of the year and watch as your country and way of life are replaced by a system in which you will be a slave in a concentration camp, you, not the conspirators, are guilty because you, by silent acquiescence, invite tyranny, and oppression. And when you have to steal food to eat because your own production is for foreign use, because the Department of Commerce, through Executive Order 11490 and its predecessors, is responsible for international distribution of our commodities, don't sit in a culvert hiding and eating and wondering what happened because you made it all possible. When your family is split up and spread across the United States to do slave labor and you never see your loved ones again, it will be your fault because you did nothing to prevent it. And once we lose our freedom, we are never going to regain it. That is why we must stand together to prevent the loss of our freedom as citizens of the United States. Thank you very much. Conclusion taped report. And that is chapter 6. That is FEMA. That is how over the generations, over the decades, powers have slowly been usurped from the three arms of your government and placed into the hands of people who are not elected, who should not have any say or control over anything. Pronounced decay, okay. Dachau, okay. But yeah, we see what those executive orders have done and how they've made easy for people to take over the country. And I know, Behold a Pale Horse, this is specifically speaking on America and America's role in the New World Order, but don't think America's the only one. It's taken as long as it's taken with you guys because you have the Constitution. And Canada is so far down the road of socialism heading towards communism because we don't have such rights and freedoms. And it's the same in many countries around the world. So, we're all looking to you guys. We need you guys to stand up for your rights, because if you guys can't save your own rights, then the rest of us are definitely hooped. Linda says, as long as the press is against us, most people won't believe us about anything. There is that. However, I think I think they tried COVID too soon. And I think that because of trying it too soon, a lot of people woke up who wouldn't have woken up otherwise. And I think in the years since then, um, seeing the outcome of the different parts of the COVID pandemic plans, more people are waking up. Uh, I think I think there's a chance. I still think there's a chance. Now, I also believe in God. I do believe the Bible. I don't think it's just a collection of fairy tales. Um, and so I know it will only get worse, and it will continue to get worse until he comes again. So I know that. But I would like to think that those of us who have this sort of knowledge will make changes within our own lives and help spread the information to others so that we can save as many people as as we can. Um, we did the vaccine passport. I wasn't allowed to leave my province. Um, and if I left my country, I would not be allowed back in. And there were a lot of people who were okay with a lot of the government stuff, but then they got stuck with this stupid passport. There were a lot of Canadians stuck in America, and vice versa. There was people saw just how easily the government can usurp your rights to travel, your freedom, your bodily autonomy. Um, a lot of people saw it, and I think that was their mistake in doing COVID when they did. Um, they didn't have enough for the new generations, and they still had too many of the older generations around to see it and call it out. Um, yeah, I believe I'll die or be caught up, and I'm okay with that too, Linda. I know as an Adventist, I should be looking forward to that day. And I mean, I do look forward to the day when Jesus comes, but I think some Adventists look for it too much, look too forward to it, that they ignore what's happening in the now. And there are things happening right now that we have the potential ability to stop or to slow down. Um, and I'm okay with doing that because I've got nieces and nephews, and I would like them to be able to have their own kids who have their own kids. Um, I really, yeah, I don't know. I'm 50-50 on. I want him to come, but I don't want all the horribleness that I know it has to come before him to come. You see what I mean? If we could skip the awfulness and just get right to the moment when he is here again, that would be amazing. Um, but in the meantime, we know it's only going to get worse. That doesn't mean we can't do our best to make things better in this world, you know, for the people around us. So that's it for chapter 6. Behold a pale horse. Next chapter, I shut it down, but the next chapter is Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1988. Oh, that'll be fun. That'll be loads of fun. Preparation for the police state. That's going to be cool. But yeah, it was quite interesting to find out what FEMA is really meant for. I honestly, I'm very surprised that national weather disasters um, aren't a part of their mandate at all. you know? AP says, I wanted kids. Then I was given MS for no reason. So now I can barely take care of myself. No kids. Yeah, see, I was the same. I wanted kids. I did not know that health issues and medications would cause me to not be able to have kids. Um, so no kids. What can you do, right? But Cynthia says, I have a girlfriend who believes anything on Facebook. According to her, she's being told that if Trump gets in the White House, he will become a dictator, which is hilarious because Trump has already been in the White House once. He lost, depending on your position, lost the election. He stepped down and then he pursued it through the courts. If he was going to be a dictator, he would have done it then. He wouldn't have stepped down and pursued it through the courts. The person I'm concerned about being a dictator is the guy you got in there right now who can easily be removed and replaced with Kamala. Trying very hard. I'm running through all the bad names of her. But they can easily take him out and put her in. And I can see either of them just saying, nope, we're just going to hang out here. We like it here. You know, and FEMA is a lie. Yeah, it is completely not for the purposes that they made people believe they were for. They have got such permissions and powers, and all they need is for, Sleepy Joe Biden to say, yeah, it's a national emergency, whatever, and that's it. Bam, done. Military coup, and suddenly the shadow government is the government, and you're all slaves. So I'm sure that FEMA is not the only um, organization or group that has powers um, this vast. Although, I don't know. We'll get into it in the book. I'm hoping he's going to talk about everything. Harris is already a dictator. Just listen to the way she talks and look at her actions. Exactly. And I mean, look at Trudeau right now. Lovely Turdwater, our all hail the leader. Um, he's trying to shut Parliament early so that we cannot possibly have another election and get rid of him before next spring. Um, as it is, because they've got the minority government and the agreements between the Liberals and the NDPs and the Bloc Québécois and whatnot. They are able to do a lot of things without uh, without letting the average Canadian citizen know. There are so many bills being passed right now. The vegan bill, the vegan bill is so scary. It's already passed first reading, and if it succeeds past its final reading, it gives power to the UN. If in is it the UN? Yes, it is the UN. Uh, all my country has to do is call a national emergency, and the UN has power to take control of any and all farms, any and all animals for food. Um, as it stands, when it goes into effect, they will immediately start putting in more laws to make it even harder to be able to produce beef, chicken, turkey, what have you. It also is going to be investing in faux protein, the non-meat meats. So, yeah, my government's doing it too, but at least you guys in America, you've got options. I mean, we've got options too if we choose to um, use them. But you guys have got the Constitution, and that's what I keep coming back to. That Constitution is so, so important for you guys. And if you fall, we're all toast. So just like during COVID, yeah. And you'll tell the powers to be to pound sand. Yeah, well, and I mean that's what I did to a certain extent. I wore masks in the grocery store when I was grocery shopping, not because I felt it would do anyone any good or save anyone, but simply because I just can't be bothered to have a fight and make a fuss. Now I know that is not good when I'm the one saying do not comply and civil disobedience, but from my respect, or from my perspective, it was just easier to wear the damn mask when I was in there. And as soon as I left, I took the stupid mask off. That being said, I was not complying with any of the other ridiculousness, and I assuredly did not take any of their miracle cures. People are on their 10th, 12th boosters by now, and the ridiculousness that stemmed from that, I did not comply. Never let a blue helmet on your property. Oh, was it a Shizzy saying? I love myself some Shizzy. I never get a chance to watch him, but I do love him. I've been on streams with him. He's a whole lot of fun, and he's got that voice. I mean, who can say no to listening to him speak or read or whatever he wants to do? Exactly, AP. Do not comply, but do what you have to do to survive. So yeah, in my mind, it wasn't worth the potential of getting booted from the only grocery store I can get to with no car. Um, just to say, no, I don't want to wear a mask. It was just easier to wear the mask and go and buy my groceries during my allotted time because I was unvaxxed. I had to go for special time. Because, yeah, we did have stores that were allowed to remain open. They had special um, shopping times. The elderly were allowed in first thing, and then the unvaxxed were allowed in, and then the vax were allowed in, and they were supposed to be doing cleans between. It was just ridiculous. So yeah, I wore the silly mask so I could get my food, but yeah, that's it. It doesn't need to be, the 6 feet apart and the all the silliness, all the stupidity, um, the caution tape on playgrounds and arresting kids who are playing ice hockey on a frozen over pond. It's just insanity, and they're talking about it again. They're already talking about the new COVID and the next pandemic and la la la. So I'm not surprised that bills like the vegan bill and Bill 31 in BC, which gives the UN the right to take over anyone's property, home, anything that they need in an emergency, they can take, they can bulldoze, they can kill your animals, they can, burn your stuff, whatever, and they do not need to pay you anything for it. Not a red cent. They can just take it and do whatever they want and fuck you. And that bill passed in BC, which is the province that I live in. Um, and that's giving the power to the UN. So that's why I say, even though, Trudeau, when we finally manage to get an election called, Trudeau will not be in anymore. It will be Pierre Poilievre. But he is just a woke light version of Trudeau. He is he's a puppet for the UN, not a puppet for the WEF. So at the end of the day, we're going to be in the same boat. We've got a vote happening in BC. I actually, today is the first day I can go out and vote. It's going to be interesting to watch just because the NDP, the New Democratic Party, which is the Socialist Party, they have been in control of the country for decades now. It's their fault that we legalized all of the hard narcotics. It's their fault for a lot of stuff. But it's so bad that even on the lower mainland where all the socialists live, and it's a little happy little community there, it's gotten so bad there that even they are considering voting conservative. So it'll be interesting. We may just get a conservative party in control of BC for the first time ever, I think. BC has always been, on the hippy dippy side of things. Canada's Green Party started in BC. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. But again, even if we do get a conservative party in control of BC, it's not going to change anything. Conservative doesn't mean what it used to mean. So, oh, the VP debate. I was watching the VP debate with Mighty. So I didn't get to see what Shizzy had to say. lot of alcohol and then a lot more alcohol. Right on. I was at my neighbor's watching it on Mighty Stream, and the neighbors and I, yes, we had a lot of alcohol and then a lot more alcohol for that too. Um, or no, not for the VP debate. Sorry, the alcohol with the neighbor was for the Trump Kamala debate. Is that one? But yeah, they're basically just shows now, right? Like it's the same. As long as they own the media can keep the polls close, and as long as they can keep the polls close, they can steal the election. Right on, AP. Right on. Now, do you guys? I know that in Canada there are groups that will like come and pick me up from my house and drive me to the voting station and let me vote, and then they'll drive me back home again. I don't know if they have any services like that in America. Um, I mean, I don't think it would be considered buying a vote for a specific party if it's just civilians doing it. And I'm pretty sure that's it's part of when you volunteer to help Elections Canada. Um, one of the gigs is doing that, is being a driver. So I don't know if they've got something like that. Maybe you could partake of those services. Um, but yeah, being in BC, I have to vote during the early election days because the election, by the time our polls close over here on the west, there's already been enough tabulated to figure out who the prime minister is going to be. So our votes don't really count for much unless I vote early. And I'm not even certain if it gets in then, honestly, these days. I don't know. I don't know what to trust. But all I do know is I will be voting PPC wherever I can. And when I can't vote PPC, I will vote Conservative. That's the best I can do. And maybe someday, if I can get out of the house and not be too scared to exit and go out in public, maybe I can get into my local government. But until that time, I'm going to just do this. I'll talk to you guys. I'll tell you what I know. We can learn together and share the information out. Shizzy's on a 3-month probation. Oh gosh. Yeah, I know. Mighty's off YouTube totally. Mighty is gone. He is exclusively Rumble now, thanks to the YouTubes and the election or the erection troubles. See, we're not allowed. YouTube apparently doesn't like the one E word, so I've been using erection since I can't remember which one of your governors or senators or whatever said it accidentally, but it was funny as all get out. So that's what I call it now, and it makes me happy. But on that note, we've been going for 2 hours, 40 minutes. I've got cats who are being super cute, which means it's coming up on lunchtime for them. And before they start walking on the keyboard, I will wrap it up here. Thank you guys so much for being here. And thank you for hanging out with me on a Thursday, because I ended up having to do something yesterday. That worked really well for everyone. And until next, well, I'll be here again, going back to Wednesday mornings next week. And I will be doing the Mystery Babylon with Mighty on Tuesday nights. I do game night on Saturday nights with Shenny. And then Shenny and I do something Sundays where we're just bored and we hang out with the chat. So you can find me at any or all of those places. And until the next time, I love you guys. Thanks for being here. We'll see ya.
Something's changed from day to day. Science, art, or history's play. No path too twisted, no trail too thin. She dives right in where to begin. After anything, spirit so pure. From ancient lore to future dreams, every question finds its gleam. Wherever she goes, answers will follow. Into the depths or up high in the hollow. Curiosity calls, she's ready to find solutions to everything on her mind.